That is wonderful. Thank you so much. And shout out to Professor Tawana Kupe. I must mention that I recently did an interview with him, the same series that we are covering this book. So that's actually interesting. One other shout out that I'll also make is to Dr. Limokani Mate, who is also a contributor to a chapter of this book. I recently interviewed him for a book that he did on African radio that was also published by Routledge. So let me now invite Jimmy. How are you?
I think as unlike Albert, for me, really, media has really been something that I've studied through and through. I haven't really sat in a newsroom, working as a journalist and whatnot. But my interest in journalism started really way back, and I think as a kid, I had two interests: whether to become a lawyer, whether to become a journalist. I think maybe out of this sort of, if you may want, maybe naive way of thinking that if you have that information, you can change things. If you're a lawyer, you can advocate and change things. Yes, so I ended up studying media as a result of that, maybe contrary to what my family would have wanted, because at the time that I wanted to study media in Malawi, but by the way, there were no media communication studies until mid-1990s, because when Dr. Banda was there in power, media was pretty much outlawed. There's no freedom of expression, only one media, that belongs to the government and whatnot was allowed. So these were new things at the time that I said I wanted to study media. But lucky enough, I found my way out of Malawi, went to the UK, where then I was able to start to do media. So any written piece of journalism that you can come across is really something that I've written, but outside the newsroom. So my sort of introduction to this field was more or less like, outside looking inwards. So I had a lot of questions about how media work. There are a lot of normative issues that we think about: this media should do this, media should do that. But in reality, the situation is different. So I come from that introspective, that wondering how actually media work. So I did media studies, Bachelor of Social Sciences in Media Studies at undergrad. Then I did media and communication at master's level at the London Metropolitan University in London. Moved back to Malawi around 2013. When I started working at the University of Malawi, eventually, initially as a part-timer, then become a full faculty member, and it's where I am now. But at the moment, I'm on study leave. I'm studying for my PhD at Wits University. I'm trying to look at, again, the same issues, how media actually operate. So looking at how media cover supernatural issues in Africa, issues to do with witchcraft, which is to do with people with albinism, and all these issues that cannot easily be put in a bracket when you can say this is true, this is not, and media has to be objective. The media has to state facts and stuff and all that. So I'm looking at all that intersection of society and the media, if I want to put it that way. So the idea about doing this book, as Albert has explained, again, comes back to the fact that, if you're struggling to understand how the media work, and there are sort of certain scenarios where cultural issues find themselves in the media, but not in the framework of objective media as we're talking about. How can we talk about African media, and where are we missing it? Issues of, we have three-tier broadcasting systems in Malawi. There's, public, community, and private media. Do we really have public media, or do we, call this public media in language, but maybe in practice it's state media? So all these questions basically contributed to the interest in producing this book, trying to really understand where and how can we situate African media within this global discourse. Sure, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Dr. Gunde, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've had an interest in the journalism way back. I was actually studying in Zimbabwe way back at the time when Malawi was and other countries in the region were getting towards rural politics. So I used to follow quite a lot. But the funny thing is, I was not funny as such, but I was studying a bachelor's degree in English with a minor in business administration. That was in Bulawayo at a private university run by the Adventist church. So everyone would come to my room to follow up on what was happening in Malawi then, because I was always on the radio trying to follow up on which party and all the amalgamations between the parties, then the formations of the United Democratic Front and the Alliance for Democracy and all that. And then that was a passion. In fact, that passion came out of my dad, because he would always kick us out of the living room when he's listening to news from around the world, especially focused on Africa, because there were dissidents who were staying in the UK. They had been exiled elsewhere in South Africa. So at the time there was this autocracy. So we were always worried. He was always worried that maybe somebody's looking out and watching out and all that. So I was like, why is he always saying we should not sit around the living room? Because if we were following the foreign exile, those are in exile, some people would think maybe you are collaborating with them. So they would actually maybe come and arrest you or something like that. So that grew my passion to say, I think I should be listening to this as well. So until when I was very young. But then I went to university, people would come to me and they would tell me that I was the BBC, actually. Because they would say, I would tell them, so-and-so has now arrived in Malawi from exile, this and that. And then I graduated from there. I was about to start a teaching job. That very week, there was an advert for trainee reporters at the Daily Times newspaper. I went, I was interviewed, and they told me to start. It was on a Friday, and I was told to start working on a Sunday. It was sports reporting. So I was told to go to, we used to call it BAT ground. And I was working alongside some guy who would help me how to craft a story. That was it. And then they introduced the business pullout, the first one of its kind in Malawi. I was dropped in because of that minor in business administration. That was it. But yet my background was about magazine article writing, literature, poetry, and all that. Not necessarily journalism. But then my master's, when I went to the US, that's when I grew further because of my background where I was working for the Daily Times. Until when I came back to Malawi, I was hired by the University of Malawi to the field of media and communication. And then they sponsored me. I mean, I got a scholarship for a PhD in journalism because that's where I am. But I've always been passionate about the media, especially when it comes to issues to do with political economy of mass communications and related issues. Although I've also gone into other fields, especially to do with issues to do with persuasion, communication theories and all that. Not necessarily journalism, but in the field of maybe like social movements. So it's because of I have to teach some courses in that. Then I'm ending up developing some passion towards it. But with regards to this book, it's when I had been discussing with Jimmy there. I had an interest for my PhD to be about how the winds of change, contributed to the democracy in Africa through the media, especially interviewing people who were in exile. That was my main interest. But then my supervisor said it was going to be a challenge it was going to take us time. So we wanted something that he was also interested in, which is what I did. But I had an interest in specifically people who were being interviewed by the BBC at that time when I was young and they were in exile. And during the winds of change, they were quite enormous of them. Somewhere in Channel Africa, some the BBC and the likes of Shaka Sali on VOA, and I liked all those guys. I would follow VOA, I would follow the BBC Focus on Africa, and then I would also follow Channel Africa, and there were Malawians there and Zambians. So that's what I wanted, but specifically about the contribution of the media towards the winds of change, which I never did. Now, when Albert and Jimmy brought this project up, I said, I think this is where some of the issues that I wanted to bring out in what I thought would be my PhD project, maybe they'll be articulated in here. Yeah, that's how I ended up in this project. That's what I can say for now.
Wow.